Here's a story out of New York. A 10-year-old child has just become the youngest transgender model to walk the runway at New York's Fashion Week. This young boy goes by Noella. He participated in the Trans Clothing Company show. This was created by the designer Mel Atkinson, this according to Metro. And Noella, this little boy who the adults in his life are dressing up to be a little girl, says, "It feels good that I'm already inspiring trans kids to be themselves." Now, obviously, what transgenderism does is the opposite. They encourage kids and all people not to be themselves, to be other people, or to pretend to be other people, to have a little boy pretend to be a little girl, or vice versa. I'm all for encouraging people to be themselves, and not even just themselves as they are, but to be a perfect, good version of themselves. All people they can go bad or they can go good. They can get into a lot of vice and sin and bad stuff, or they can do good stuff, pursue virtue, sanctity, holiness. And we should encourage the latter, not the former. It's not just that you're born, some people are born good, some people are born bad. That's not true. We have free will. We have a conception of what's good and what's bad. Okay, and we can know something about that and pursue that. Here, we're getting the worst possible version. We're encouraging people to only pursue really bad stuff and then to just pretend to be totally different than they are outright. How on earth does a 10-year-old kid wind up doing a drag dance at New York Fashion Week? Obviously because this poor little boy has pervert parents. His current guardians, that's how it's described in the article. I don't even know what the relationship of these adults are to the kid. I just know that they're perverts. Ray and Dee McMahon told Metro that Noella, who's this little boy, began socially transitioning at the age of 4. So you read that and you say, Ray and Dee, that sounds like normal people, right? But I know they're not normal people because they're transing their little 4-year-old. So of course, these guys are both, guys or girls, I don't know what they are both sexual deviants. They identify as non-binary. And so whose fault is this? The primary fault is the fault of the parents. Or I don't know the parents, the current guardians, as this is ambiguously described in the paper. But the parents are the fault of us. That's really what this is about. We can't just say those guys are perverts or girls or whatever they are. We can't just say they're perverts, this is their child abuse. Yeah, it is. They're primarily responsible, but we let this happen. We let this happen. How on earth did these people adopt a child or do it, or through surrogacy create a child? I actually don't know if it's 2 guys or 2 girls or a guy and a girl. The fact that I don't know that is our fault politically because we've radically redefined marriage, so we have no idea what marriage means. We tolerate all sorts of sexual degeneracy, so men can pretend to be women and women can pretend to be men, and they can pretend to be ambiguous. People are having a surgery called sexual nullification. That means they just chop off their genitals entirely. And we tolerate this. Not only do we tolerate this, we celebrate this, and if you in any way criticize it, you're called a hater and you can be ostracized from society. I'm not sure that this video will remain on YouTube. You know, I broadcast my show in part on YouTube. I'm not sure that this will even be allowed to be kept up because I don't think that these pervs should be allowed within 300 yards of a child, and I don't think they should be able to pretend that their union is a marriage, and I don't think they should be able to pretend that whichever one of them is a man, either or none of them is a man is a girl, or vice versa, or that they're neither. That's our fault. We let it get this far. We in the political community. We let the libs go this far because so many conservatives, what did they say? Well, it doesn't affect me. I think government should get out of the marriage business entirely. Well, I don't know what people do in their bedroom between consenting adults. That's none of my business. I think this is my business. I don't want kids on drag red carpets. I don't want kids, little boys dancing around like little girls for the satisfaction of perverts at New York's Fashion Week. I don't want these Yale psychopaths to be able to trans 3-year-olds. That's a political problem. That's why the government's always involved in marriage, by the way, because marriage is the fundamental political institution, and the state, meaning the political community, obviously has an interest and obviously always has some kind of say in how to raise the next generation. That's what it is. That's what marriage is. Marriage is a lifelong bond, a union between a man and a woman for the sake of the generation, the procreation, and the education of children. We have a say about that, or we should. or we just let this go. And I blame the libs, but I expect it of the libs. Really here, my special ire is for those squishy conservatives who let it get this far because they didn't have the moral clarity, or even if they did have the moral clarity in a lot of cases, they didn't have the moral courage to say, no, sorry, Ray and D. McMahon, you don't get to pretend that your non-binary union is a marriage, and you don't get to either purchase a child or adopt a child or rent a woman's womb and create a child in this way that establishes the domination of technology over the origin and destiny of the human person. And it's not about you. You don't get to do your weird stuff. Sorry, there are rules and standards, and we are going to defend them.
Hey, Michael. I listened to you on Ben Shapiro's show the other day, and you got to the mailbag part where you're talking about how we shouldn't give the death penalty to rapists because that would incentivize them to kill their victims. But I feel like that's contradictory to things you've said in the past about how laws affect people's behavior because culture is downstream of politics. And if you make harsher punishments for crimes, then that makes people less likely to do crime. So why shouldn't we make harsher punishments for rape, i.e. capital punishment, death penalty, so that less people would rape? But you said on Ben Shapiro's show that it wouldn't, well, you didn't say it wouldn't decrease rape. You just said it would incentivize people to kill their victims. But the implication there is that it wouldn't decrease the amount of rapes. It would just increase the amount of people who are raped and murdered. Can you explain that to me?
Well, you
Love
were
the show.
Thank you very much. You were right up until that very moment. And you even caught yourself and you said, well, okay, you didn't say that it wouldn't decrease rape, but the implication was, but no, your implication, the thing that you inferred is not something that I implied. Yes, it is true. Harsher punishments for rape would disincentivize rape. And because the law is a teacher, you would get less rape. Sure. But at the same time, simultaneously, you would incentivize the rapists who do commit rape to kill their victims if the punishment for murder and the punishment for rape were the same. Because the rapist, in a regime in which rape is punished less severely than murder, the rapist has some incentive not to kill his victim, even though by not killing his victim, he increases the chances that he'll be caught because the victim could go to the police and say what happened. But in a regime in which rape and murder get the exact same punishment, then the rapist has absolutely no incentive whatsoever other than his own obviously malfunctioning conscience, or the conscience that he doesn't really listen to, not to murder his victim. So you create an incentive for the rapist to do that. So what we have here is a balancing of different incentives and different desirable outcomes. And what we have to apply here is prudence. I agree. If you gave the death penalty to rapists, you might, and very likely would, reduce the total number of rapes. You would never get the total number of rapes to zero, but you probably would reduce the number of rapes, but you would increase the number of rape victims who are murdered, and I don't think that's worth the cost. So from the position of prudence, I would say it is worth reducing somewhat the punishment for rape if you are going to decrease the number of rape victims who are murdered, even if by doing so you somewhat increase the incentives to commit a rape or the prevalence of rape. Again, I mean, we can't really know the degree to which these things would shift statistically, but even granting the premise, I just think from a prudential point of view, by decreasing the number of rape victims who are murdered, that would be worth tolerating getting rid of one of the disincentives to rape. But it's a judgment call. It's a call for prudence. It's not an exact science. That's why statecraft is much more of an art than it is a sort of science that can just be plugged into a computer and formulated by a robot. I'm so glad you like that clip. Now, before you go, look, we got over 1 million subscribers. I love that. I want 1 trillion, okay? And the first step to 1 trillion subscribers is you clicking that bell. So ring it, click it, ding dong, wada wada bing bong. We'll see you next time.